The voice of the drum calls. It sings a song of those who came before us and those to come. A song of survival and strength. A song of participation and voice. A song that calls us together. When we come together and participate in the 2010 census, we use this tool as the voice of all our Native people. Our voice. It is in our hands. 2010 census.
And welcome to this edition of the Native News Update on this Monday, March 1st. I'm your host for today's program, Paul DeMain. Many of the stories read here can also be found at our website at IndianCountryNews.com, and you can also go to our other video stories there at IndianCountryTV.com. Here are the news stories for the day from the Associated Press and other Native news sources. President Barack Obama on February 26th approved a disaster declaration for the winter storm that knocked out power in wide areas of North Dakota last month. The president's decision means federal aid will be available to help pay for repairs and cleanup. The declaration covers 25 of North Dakota's 53 counties and the Standing Rock Sioux Reservation. Governor John Hoeven asked for the declaration after the storm. Local governments and rural electric cooperatives estimated it would cost more than $20 million to repair the damage. Hoeven said the federal government will pay 75% of eligible cleanup costs and the state will pay 10%. Local governments are responsible for the rest. Federal officials say they are sending a team of investigators to look into vandalism of some ancient tribal pictographs near Lewiston's Hell's Gate State Park. Some of the animal figures and geometric pictographs on a basalt wall were recently covered with spray-painted graffiti. Archaeologists believe the red pigment pictographs there are at least 2,500 years old. Damaging the pictographs violates the Federal Archaeological Resources Protection Act of 1979. The vandalism was discovered there last week at the Red Elk Shelter managed by the Army Corps of Engineers and likely occurred within the last 2 weeks. The spray-painted graffiti includes references to marijuana with the words "Vote to Toke" and a pot leaf with ganja written below. There are also peace signs, the initials TC, and the names Freddie B. and Cottonmouth Kings, a marijuana-themed rap band. Carolyn Merrill, a Moscow-based consultant specializing in ancient rock art, says the damage to the site is extensive. The graffiti defaces the most prominent pictograph at the site, one depicting a red elk. And in our continuing discussion on national health care, here is our observer from the Shoshone-Bannock tribes and Kaiser Fellowship recipient, Mark Trahant, for an update on the latest following the President's Health Care Summit last week.
Thanks for joining with us, Mark. Can you tell us a little bit about where this health care process is at? I've learned more in the last 6 to 7 months than I ever have about legislation about what can and cannot happen to it, and we had a summit with the president last week. What did you see going on at that summit?
Well, and as I expected, the Indian health system was not a part of the summit at all. It wasn't even mentioned. But it was an attempt by the president to bring in Democratic and Republican leaders and get them talking about what could be done in healthcare reform and kind of just hear everybody out. I don't think they intended to sway minds as much as let everyone have a place to talk about it.
And a public place for the public to see the discussion going on.
Right. I watched all 7 hours, piped in directly from the White House. It was pretty interesting.
Well, I didn't get a chance to watch 7 hours, but what I watched didn't seem to be anything about bipartisan trying to find middle ground. To me, it seemed to me that it was more a point of where the Democrat says this is what they want to do and the Republican says we're not going to support it and here's what we're going to do, kind of a thing.
Right. Well, in fact, the one thing I think I learned that was new is, to me, one of the core divisions is this idea, is the American system the best in the world? The data says it's not. All the data says it's not. And yet there is this fundamental core belief from a lot of people, particularly in the Republican Party, that the data doesn't matter, that we are indeed number one.
Well, we're definitely seeing something called checks and balances going on, aren't we?
Oh, yeah.
And,
yeah, I mean, the president just can't do this on his own. He needs Congress engaged.
Okay, so let's get into the dynamics of this. Up until this point, they needed 60 votes to overcome a potential filibuster. Someone standing up and talking for days on end until people just get tired and quit it. And
Right.
if they have 60 votes in the Senate, they can bring that to an end.
Well, and in fact, let me go back to your statement. It used to be, for most of this country's history, that this filibuster was until people stopped talking. It was 60 votes. Now it's not that at all. It's 60 votes to actually pass the legislation. People actually don't get up and filibuster like they used to. And one proposal that some people have made, including many Democrats, is why not go back to the old system where you actually have to filibuster and you have to stand on the floor until you're tired, because the way it is now, it's just become a supermajority. On this particular bill, I think what they'd like to do is they already have the Senate passed one version. Now, the House of Representatives doesn't like that version because it includes, among other things, a high-cost deductible for people who have really good insurance through work. And it turns out that a lot of Democratic constituencies, like miners, have a really good insurance program through work. So they don't want to have that tax, so they're not happy with the Senate bill. But what they could do is the House could pass the Senate bill and then try to push through a bunch of fixes on a majority vote. And it's those fixes that would be what they're calling reconciliation.
Okay, and reconciliation goes through on a simple majority of 50 plus 1.
50 plus 1, right. And the vice president could be that one.
Okay, and my understanding is right now the Republicans are saying that's not fair, that's not what you use reconciliation for. However, there's people that say, geez, when the shoe's on the other foot. The Republicans have used reconciliation in the past to get, for example, Bush's tax cuts through, if I remember right.
Or one that affected when you were working at the state government, welfare reform. That was done on reconciliation.
Okay, and so it's a process that simply means that you got a simple majority, isn't it? And wasn't like a simple majority kind of like the rule of the thumb on legislation anyway? If you have 100 votes and you get 51, it's passed?
Well, yes and no. The Senate has a great tradition, and it's been very important to Indians, of respecting the rights of minorities. There was a bill many years ago to try to settle the White Earth land claims, for example. And the tribe opposed it. They didn't have the 51 votes in the Senate, and they really were able to stop it because of a minority group of senators, at that time led by John Melcher. So it's been used by both sides to stop really bad legislation. If it weren't so, the Democrats would probably just get rid of it, but because it's not constitutional at all. It's something they could change with a simple vote. But if the shoe's on the other foot, they kind of like having that power too.
Yeah, we noticed that. Where do you see this whole healthcare legislation going? What do you think they're going to come down to? As of today, my inclination is that they're going to use the reconciliation process. I don't think 7 hours of discussing brought a single vote over to the side of the Obama healthcare plan, from what I can see. Right.
They're going to try to do that in the next few days. Hopefully that'll be the end of it. If not, we're going to have this debate for another year.
If it doesn't happen, aren't we going to have it? It might be a lot longer than a year. It might be.
Yeah.
It is something.
Well, it could be a long time. The numbers are just staggering. The longer this gets put off, the more in trouble the United States is. What's going on in Greece could be us very soon. Healthcare has gone from about 10% of the economy to 17%, and it's just continuing to rise. And if you add that in, there's just not enough money to pay for it.
Right. So we may, and there are parts of this health reform legislation that have to go through regardless of the healthcare reform. Isn't there portions of this budget that are simply refunding of certain aspects of the healthcare program in the country?
Right. And the president's budget acts as if this already passed. So that puts additional pressure because there'll be a whole new round of cuts if it doesn't.
Okay.
The New York Times Sunday said that it's really important to know that what we have, not only will the status quo change no matter what, but if we don't do something, the status quo is going to deteriorate really fast.
Well, it'll be interesting to see what. It's been an interesting several months of discussions on this, and we'll keep in touch with you, Anya. We really appreciate your time, Mark.
Happy to do it.
All right, thanks.
And that is the latest roundup of news from Indian Country on this edition of the Native News Update. We want to thank you for all joining with us. Come again back soon. Miigwech.